In 1945, as Europe burned and the Reich crumbled, something vanished in the chaos, something no record admits existed. Across abandoned Alpine passes, among shredded dispatches and falsified orders, whispers told of a convoy that never reached its destination. Allied patrols found tire tracks where there should have been snow, and requisition logs signed by men already dead. For decades, the files stayed sealed under layers of redacted ink, buried inside NATO's restricted archives. But a torn manifest, discovered in a forgotten Austrian safe house in 1973, changed everything. It bore a single stamp in fading ink: Operation Lodestar. Chapter 1. Operation Lodestar, the Ghost Convoy of 45. In late March 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. Berlin burned, the Rhine was lost, and Hitler's promises of 1,000 years had turned to weeks. Yet amid that ruin, a secret order moved quietly through the corridors of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. The directive bore the Reichsadler seal and a cipher signature attributed to General Hans Kammler, the man who oversaw Germany's most secret weapons projects. The order, labelled Betriebsauftrag 741 Lodestar, instructed that a mobile scientific detachment be evacuated from Linz to an undisclosed Alpine destination. The convoy, it said, was to move at night, unmarked, with priority over all retreating units. The first known record of the operation came from an intercepted Enigma transmission logged by the British WWII service on March 26, 1945. The message, partially decrypted, referenced Transport Grouper Lodestar proceeding to Zone Tau 9. Allied analysts could not locate any map designation for Tau 9. By the time the war ended 6 weeks later, no such group had been found, and no German archive contained further mention of it. What remained were rumours whispered by American infantrymen who claimed to have seen something on the mountain roads between Steyr and Berchtesgaden, a line of armoured trucks bearing strange insignia, escorted not by regular SS troops, but by officers wearing black field caps without rank badges. Corporal James L. Harrington of the US 65th Infantry Division was among the first to report it. In a field interrogation recorded on April 18, 1945, Harrington described a convoy of 6 to 8 heavy transports with blackout lights, moving south under air raid conditions. He claimed the vehicles carried crates longer than a man, each sealed with lead bands and numbered sequentially. When questioned about why his unit had not engaged, Harrington replied, "Orders were unclear. Command said they were ours, but the markings weren't." His superior officer, Lieutenant Robert McCaffrey, was later reassigned to counterintelligence duties in Frankfurt, and his personnel file vanished from the US Army archives by 1947. In post-war years, the story of Lodestar faded, dismissed as a confusion of retreating German logistics. That changed in 1973, when a landslide near the Austrian village of Obertraun exposed fragments of a vehicle chassis bearing Wehrmacht serial number WL 91867. The Austrian Federal Police identified it as belonging to a Mercedes L4500A transport truck, the same model used by SS technical units. Inside the rusted frame, investigators recovered the remnants of a cylindrical container made from layered steel and tungsten. Its interior walls showed signs of intense heat damage, and trace analysis revealed residues of uranium oxide. The findings were quietly classified under NATO's Sensitive Atomic Materials Directive. Unconfirmed reports suggest that a CIA technical attaché stationed in Vienna, codenamed Holloway, was dispatched to oversee the recovery. Within months, local miners who had aided the operation were relocated or died under unexplained circumstances. One, a man named Georg Reiner, reportedly told his wife before his disappearance, it was not gold they were hiding. It was something that hummed. No record of Reiner's death certificate exists in Austrian municipal files. Further intrigue emerged when journalist Anneliese Dorn published a short piece in 1978 for Der Standard, titled Die letzte Kolonne, The Last Column. Dorn claimed she had obtained fragments of a US Army report stamped Restricted Theatre Intelligence, European Command, 1946. The document allegedly described an abandoned depot near the village of Hallstatt, containing multiple storage drums, each shielded by 2-inch lead lining. According to the text, the site was destroyed by demolition charges 3 days after discovery under directive from higher authority. Within a week of publication, Dawn's article was retracted. She left Vienna later that year and was never heard from again. In 1986, declassified OSS microfilm reels, released under the US Freedom of Information Act, revealed a telegram addressed to Alan Dulles in Bern, Switzerland, dated April 4, 1945. The telegram referenced Kammler's shadow transport and noted potential relocation of Advanced Technical Corps to Alpine Defense Redoubt, probable codename Lodestar. Dulles's marginal note, written in pencil, reads only, "Could this be the package?" Historians have debated for decades what that phrase implied. Some suggest it referred to nuclear prototypes, others to high-level personnel destined for post-war extraction under Operation Paperclip. Soviet archives, opened briefly in the 1990s, deepened the mystery. A GRU inventory log dated September 12, 1945, lists recovered materials from an unidentified German scientific convoy located near Bad Ischl. Among the entries, 5 containers metallic composite, 2 damaged interior traces of heavy isotope compound. Another line, hastily redacted, includes the phrase, "transfer to Ural Facility Number 12. If accurate, this would indicate that at least part of Operation Lodestar fell into Soviet hands. Yet no photographic evidence survives, and all related Soviet documentation was sealed again in 2003 under the State Defense Secrecy Directive. The last known lead came from a CIA reconnaissance mission during Project Cold Drop in 1973. Drone footage taken over the Austrian Alps showed what analysts described as metallic anomalies consistent with buried vehicles. The site was officially logged as glacial debris, but a still frame from the film, later leaked by an anonymous source, clearly shows the outline of a military truck's cabin and the faint marking of a swastika beneath the ice. Forensic imagery experts verified the photo's authenticity in 1999, but could not confirm its origin. The unanswered questions linger. What were those sealed cylinders? And why were they prioritized when Germany was already lost? Was Kammler moving technology, people, or something far more dangerous? The few surviving references to Lodestar describe it as a project beyond conventional ordnance, involving energy research conducted under the SS technical branch at Hechingen. Allied scientists later found fragments of documentation describing a device capable of producing intense electromagnetic discharge. Whether this research ever reached completion remains unknown, but it is notable that multiple engineers associated with Kammler's command were quietly absorbed into US and Soviet post-war programs within a year of Germany's surrender. The mountain roads where Lodestar disappeared remain treacherous. No official excavation has ever been sanctioned there. In 2011, hikers near the Dachstein Range reported hearing a low, mechanical resonance emanating from beneath the ice caves. Austrian authorities closed the area 2 days later, citing unstable geological conditions. No further statements were issued. The truth behind Operation Lodestar may never surface in full, but as fragments of its existence continue to emerge, from declassified intercepts, missing officers, and silent convoys entombed in ice, the possibility remains that the dying Reich carried something south that spring of 1945, something powerful enough to reshape the post-war world, or destroy it if found again. Chapter 2. The Volkhov Directive, Stalin's Forgotten Bargain. The winter of 1942 was a graveyard of men and machines across the Volkhov front. Temperatures plunged to -30, supply lines froze solid, and both German and Soviet forces suffered catastrophic losses in the marshes east of Leningrad. Yet amid that desolation, a curious entry appeared in an NKVD field communication log dated December 14, 1942. It referenced a contact initiative, codename Volkhov 7, authorized under personal instruction from Central Command. The page following the entry had been torn out. For decades, that missing page haunted historians, until fragments of it surfaced in a 1959 Bundesnachrichtendienst intercept, revealing that Volkhov 7 may have been far more than a tactical exchange. It was, by all indications, an arrangement of mutual desperation between two enemies who, for a single frozen night, shared a common fear greater than each other. At the time, the Red Army's Second Shock Army was surrounded by German forces near Myasnoye Bor. Soviet archives record that General Andrei Vlasov's troops were starving, their munitions exhausted, German propaganda later exploited this collapse as proof of Soviet weakness. Yet hidden beneath official reports was evidence that a detachment from the NKVD's Scientific Technical Directorate, operating undercover as medical personnel, had been inserted into the encircled zone. Their mission was to secure a German prisoner transport, captured days earlier, a group of officers attached to the Oranienburg chemical weapons program. According to partial testimony from NKVD courier Sergei Bryulov, recovered in 1951, these prisoners were carrying sealed containers labeled E-23, a chemical formulation developed under the Reich's Kampfstoffgruppe Afaf initiative. Bryulov's testimony, given under duress in a post-war interrogation by Smersh, described the exchange as not a capture, but a trade. He stated that Soviet agents arranged a meeting with a detachment of the German 18th Army under Colonel Otto Eisenberg, who was himself operating without the knowledge of his superiors. The rendezvous point was a frozen riverbend north of Tikhvin, coordinates 60°, 34°, a location now submerged beneath modern reservoirs. Bryulov wrote that both sides met under white flags. There was no gunfire, he recalled, only fog and the sound of ice cracking beneath the weight of what they carried. The contents of the exchange were described in vague terms, but one line of his report survives unredacted. Compound E-23 was demonstrated briefly. The reaction caused the officer in charge to scream. Within days of the meeting, both units withdrew. 3 weeks later, the Red Army launched a renewed offensive, and the encircled German corps was annihilated. No survivors from Eisenberg's detachment were ever documented. The NKVD team was listed as missing, presumed captured. Their names were erased from subsequent personnel rosters. In 1959, the West German intelligence service BND intercepted a coded Soviet radio message referencing a long-term containment operation designated Volkhov 7 continuation. The message, decrypted years later, mentioned the need for storage under permafrost conditions and cited anomalous readings near Lake Ladoga. Western analysts initially dismissed it as disinformation, yet photographs taken by U-2 surveillance flights in 1960 revealed several sealed facilities in the Karelian Isthmus, each surrounded by triple barbed wire and marked with chemical hazard symbols. Declassified CIA memoranda describe one structure as identical in layout to known nuclear storage bunkers, though with no radiation signature. One of the most puzzling threads emerged from the 1961 defection of Soviet biochemist Alexei Chernov. During his debriefing in West Berlin, Chernov described a classified research program he claimed had its origins in the Volkhov exchange. He alleged that Stalin personally approved the deal to acquire experimental German nerve compounds to accelerate Soviet biochemical development. Chernov also stated that the NKVD's initial tests with E-23 led to uncontrollable cell degradation, producing chemical burns unlike any documented warfare agent. In his testimony, he referenced a restricted zone along the Baltic coast, known internally as Quarantine Sector 9, where incineration of infected soil had taken place for more than a decade. American analysts were skeptical until 1963, when a Finnish forestry crew operating near the former front line uncovered a mass of corroded canisters marked with faded German script. Samples sent to US labs reportedly matched the spectral profile of E-23 compounds described by Chernov. The Finnish government sealed the area immediately and denied international access, claiming contamination from industrial waste. However, declassified diplomatic cables show Finnish officials privately requested US assistance in neutralizing persistent agents of unclassified type. Further Soviet documents, released during the Yeltsin era, briefly confirmed the NKVD's presence at the Volkhov exchange site. Among them was a heavily censored memorandum dated January 9, 1943, signed by Lavrenti Beria himself. The surviving sentence reads, "Regarding the issue of reciprocity with German officers, success contingent on silence of all witnesses." Below the line, Beria's signature appears beside a small black ink blot, as though intentionally placed to obscure additional words. The few surviving German references to the meeting come from the diary of SS Sturmbannführer Wilhelm Keitel Jr., son of the Field Marshal. In an entry dated February 1, 1943, he wrote, "The Reich's science has outpaced our understanding. The Russians have made a bargain with devils, and so have we." Keitel Jr. was killed weeks later near Mia. His body was never recovered. His notebook was found in 1945 by advancing Soviet troops and remained classified until 1992. What, precisely, E-23 was has never been fully determined. Modern analysis of the recovered material shows traces of uranium and organophosphate structures, suggesting a hybrid between radiological and nerve agents, something that would explain the bizarre physical effects reported by early witnesses. Soviet medical bulletins from the post-war years describe cases of flesh vitrification among workers at chemical storage sites, yet never mention E-23 by name. Western researchers have long speculated that Volkhov 7 represented a convergence point between German desperation and Soviet ambition, an illicit wartime exchange that birthed a new generation of post-war weapons research. Others believe the entire story was a fabrication, a Cold War legend born of mutual paranoia. But the paper trail is hard to ignore. Identical cipher designations in Soviet and German archives, parallel gaps in personnel records, and a consistent reference to compound E-23. In 1986, when the Chernobyl disaster drew global attention, several decontamination specialists privately noted similarities between the chemical residue found in early reactor meltdown zones and archived descriptions of E-23. One Soviet chemist, speaking anonymously, stated, "It was not radiation that burned the skin like that. It was something older, something they stopped making because it could not be controlled." His statement was promptly retracted, and he disappeared the following year. To this day, no official acknowledgement of Volkhov 7 exists in Russian military history. Yet the evidence continues to surface in fragments. A torn NKVD report in a collector's archive, a line of code in decrypted Enigma traffic, a forgotten entry in a defector's notes. Each fragment points back to that frozen night along the Volkhov River, where enemies met not to fight, but to exchange the unthinkable. Whatever was traded, there would vanish beneath the snow, only to resurface decades later in laboratories, bunkers, and silent quarantine zones. A legacy of a pact Stalin could never afford to admit, and the world was never meant to remember. Chapter 3. The Templar Files, Vatican Signals and the Reich. In 1944, as the Wehrmacht's retreat stretched from Normandy to the Carpathians, an invisible war unfolded in the airwaves of Europe, hidden within the solemn cadence of Vatican radio broadcasts. Prayers, psalms, and sermons. Intelligence officers on both sides believed coded signals were being transmitted to the German Abwehr and, perhaps more dangerously, to the Allied underground. The operation that sought to uncover this network was codenamed Project Sanctum. It was one of the most controversial counterintelligence efforts of the war. Its files sealed by the Holy See and Western intelligence agencies alike for over 70 years. What those transmissions carried and who truly controlled them remains one of the most unsettling enigmas in the wartime archives. The story began in August 1944, when a British signal analysis unit at Bletchley Park detected irregular modulation in the Vatican's shortwave broadcasts on frequency 3141 MHz. Technicians noted that the pauses between certain Latin readings formed an anomalous rhythm inconsistent with human speech. When transcribed into Morse timing, the gaps revealed letter groupings that corresponded to German cipher structures. A secret OSS memo dated August 19, 1944, stated plainly, Vatican transmissions exhibit recurring pattern cycles identical to Abwehr frequency keys. Possible coordination. The document was marked for Allied eyes only and circulated among the London Signals Intelligence Board under the reference Sanctum 4407. Within weeks, American and British operatives embedded in Rome began covert monitoring of Vatican radio. A technician named Harold Meyer, later deposed in 1952, described his shock when Allied cryptanalysts discovered that one broadcast on August 17th carried a coded message that matched the coordinates of an advancing Allied armoured division. The message, hidden within the Latin phrase Dominus in Argento, translated to the Lord in silver. 2 days later, that division was ambushed by retreating German forces outside Florence with uncanny precision. Internal OSS reports speculated that someone inside the Vatican had leaked troop movements through these devotional broadcasts. The Vatican, when confronted, denied all involvement, calling the allegations a grievous misunderstanding of ecclesiastical protocol. but the timing of the events was too exact to ignore. Vatican Radio's chief engineer at the time, Father Pietro Messina, had served as a communication officer in the Italian Navy before the war. In a 1947 interrogation transcript recovered from the US National Archives, Messina admitted that certain frequencies were shared under request from neutral representatives to ensure humanitarian coordination, though he refused to name which representatives. Curiously, Messina disappeared from the Vatican roster the following year. His final posting listed only as Special Missionary Service, location undisclosed. Meanwhile, OSS agents traced another figure, Archbishop Enrico Lucchesi, who oversaw Vatican diplomatic communications. Lucchesi had long-standing connections to both Swiss banking intermediaries and the German industrial conglomerate IG Farben. When British intelligence reviewed captured Abwehr ledgers in 1945, they found multiple payments issued to E. Luke in Zurich, accounts dated between 1943 and 1944. The payments were marked with the project tag Silver Convoy. The coincidence was impossible to overlook given the coded phrase Dominus in Argento. By late 1945, Project Sanctum's investigators pieced together a chilling hypothesis that Vatican Radio had been used as a neutral cover to transmit coded logistics regarding Nazi gold and art movements from Italy to Austria during the Reich's collapse. British MI6 operative Edward Nettleton, whose debriefing notes were declassified in 1998, wrote that the broadcasts in Latin were not designed for human listeners, but for mechanical decryption. Preset Abwehr receivers would convert liturgical cadence into cipher. His report recommended discrete containment, warning that exposure of Vatican complicity could fracture post-war stability in Europe. The so-called Templar files emerged years later, named after a set of Vatican archives labeled Templarius Documenta, sealed since 1946. In 1967, a partial inventory leaked through an anonymous source within the Italian intelligence service CIFAR, revealed the files included references to sanctified signal, operations, transit authorizations for ecclesiastical property, and coordination with Reichsbank envoys. The documents vanished days later, when a fire consumed part of the Apostolic Archives storage wing. Officially, the blaze was blamed on electrical fault. Unofficially, CIFAR records show 2 Swiss archivists were found dead the following week in their Rome apartment. Cause of death: carbon monoxide poisoning. A remarkable discovery occurred in 2009 when a private collector in Munich purchased an original 1944 Enigma recording reel at an estate auction. The reel contained segments of the August 17th Vatican broadcast, the same one flagged decades earlier by Allied intelligence. When the signal was analyzed using modern decryption software, a repeating data sequence emerged beneath the vocal range. Alphanumeric groups spelling Argento Kappa 0, cross-referencing German archives revealed Kappa 0 was a standing Abwehr reference to a depot near Innsbruck used for storing confiscated bullion from occupied territories. To this day, the depot's official inventory remains incomplete. Contemporary Vatican historians have largely dismissed these allegations as Cold War myth. Yet, a declassified CIA memorandum dated March 1956, referencing Operation File Vorwärts Sanctum, states, recovered evidence indicates continued post-war movement of Reich assets via clerical channels, authorized by non-combatant Holy See intermediaries under humanitarian pretext. The memo ends abruptly, its last line blacked out under national security grounds. Still more perplexing are testimonies from Allied soldiers who guarded Vatican territory during Rome's liberation. 1. Sergeant Louis P. Ferris of the U.S. 85th Division described in a 1945 affidavit that, during the night of June 5th, I observed several trucks bearing German markings entering the Vatican's side gate at Porta Sant'Anna. By morning, they were gone. His account was buried within U.S. Army intelligence reports and rediscovered only in the late 1990s by military historian Paolo Conti. What precisely was hidden behind those gates, and whether the coded messages were an act of espionage, protection, or both, remains a question no archive has fully answered. The Church maintains silence. The surviving cryptographic reels are locked in the Vatican vaults. Every few years, a new researcher petitions access under the pretense of academic study, and every request is quietly denied. And yet, fragments persist. An intercepted chant, a phrase translated too neatly, a broadcast that never officially aired. Somewhere between faith and deception, between the sacred and the profane, the the Vatican's radio waves carried a truth the world was never meant to decode. Whether they shielded fugitives, gold, or something far more elusive, the conscience of a nation at war remains an unresolved chapter in the clandestine history of World War II. Even today, deep within the archives beneath St. Peter's Basilica, files marked with the insignia of the cross and the eagle are said to rest in silence, sealed behind the weight of both God and state. Chapter 4. Cold Meridian, the Division 12 Transmissions. Between 1951 and 1954, American and British listening posts across the North Atlantic began intercepting strange encrypted pulses echoing through the Arctic air. They were first catalogued by the US Air Force's 6947th Communications Squadron at Thule Air Base, Greenland. Each burst lasted precisely 22 seconds, repeating every lunar cycle, its frequency outside the normal range of military traffic. The signals were traced to an uninhabited sector of the Soviet Arctic, near coordinates 74°, the site of a derelict weather station built by the Wehrmacht during World War II. The name of that long-forgotten station, recovered from a captured German logistics manifest, was Wetterstelle Krone. According to the record, it was once operated by a technical detachment known as Division 12, a unit officially disbanded in 1945, yet the transmissions, inexplicably, bore that same call sign, Div 12. For nearly 3 years, the so-called Cold Meridian signals baffled Allied cryptanalysts. The burst did not conform to Morse or Soviet frequency hopping protocols. Instead, analysts discovered a peculiar modulation pattern resembling heartbeat intervals. When plotted over time, the pattern formed a curve identical to the magnetic declination drift across the Arctic Circle. This coincidence prompted speculation that the transmissions were linked to geomagnetic experiments or early radar anomaly testing. But when NSA linguist Peter Wainwright examined the waveform in 1953, he noticed something even more disturbing. Embedded within the amplitude were faint traces of a human voice repeating a short phrase in German. Audio reconstruction later revealed it as "Wir sind noch hier," we are still here. By 1954, US intelligence had classified the matter under Operation Glass Dome, assigning it to a joint MI6 CIA analysis task force. Their working theory was that Division 12 had been absorbed into the Soviet research apparatus after the war, possibly as part of Stalin's recruitment of German scientists. The transmissions, they argued, could have been residual test signals from an abandoned research program. Still, none could explain why the signal strength fluctuated in sync with lunar perigee, or why no known Soviet installation existed within 200 miles of the source coordinates. To verify the signal's origin, the CIA authorized a covert expedition in 1956 codenamed Survey Team Echo. 6 men were deployed from Thule, equipped with standard Arctic gear and Geiger counters. Their mission logs, declassified in 1999, end abruptly on the 6th day of operations. The team's last recorded entry, dated February 11, 1956, reads, "Signal constant. Visual confirmation of antenna array protruding from ice. Unmanned facility." Proceeding to entry. The next page is blank. When a Soviet search patrol arrived at the same location a month later, they found the site deserted except for one frozen body seated before a transmitter. The man's eyes were open, his mouth slightly agape and his skin pale with frostbite. His dog tags identified him as Captain Richard M. Thorne, the team's communications officer. The remaining 5 men were never recovered. The transmitter itself was a relic from the Wehrmacht era, a 40-watt shortwave array powered by a diesel generator buried beneath the snow. Yet the generator showed no signs of age. It had been modified with post-war Soviet components. Even more perplexing, it was still running when discovered. Soviet engineers dismantled the device and reportedly transported it to a classified research site in Novaya Zemlya. Western intelligence received word of the discovery only years later, through a defector's report. The defector, a Soviet radio engineer named Pavel Zorin, described the device as emitting residual electromagnetic harmonics beyond any measurable frequency, adding, "The signal does not fade, it adapts." The Americans dismissed Zorin's claims as Cold War propaganda until 1962, when the same transmissions reappeared, this time intercepted by the RAF monitoring station at Fillingdale's Moor. Analysts noted subtle variations in the pattern, now resembling digital encoding decades ahead of contemporary technology. The NSA launched a fresh analysis effort, internally dubbed cold meridian continuation. This time, acoustic specialists noticed a secondary modulation embedded deep within the signal, similar to human speech recorded in reverse. When filtered, it repeated the same German phrase heard earlier, Wir sind noch hier. Only now. Another line followed, Der Himmel öffnet sich. The sky is opening. Publicly, the NSA attributed the signals to natural atmospheric reflection. Privately, internal memoranda circulated warning of unexplained acoustic resonance of potential classified significance. The British, too, pursued the lead. In 1965, an MI6 team attempted a second survey under the cover of a meteorological expedition. Their notes, partially recovered in 1987, described discovering remnants of prefabricated concrete bunkers, German field rations frozen intact, and an array of antennae embedded vertically into the permafrost. One page of their field journal simply reads, "Equipment humming below ground. Sound rhythmic, not mechanical." A subsequent Soviet expedition in 1972 reportedly sealed the entire site using thermite charges. According to declassified GRU communication logs, source Div 12 neutralized, all instruments destroyed, further transmission improbable. Yet the following year, US listening posts once again detected the signal. It was weaker now, distorted. But the same numeric pattern returned. To the analyst's disbelief, the frequency shifted slightly north, as if the transmitter itself had moved beneath the ice. Throughout the Cold War, the cold meridian mystery became a quiet obsession among intelligence circles. Every attempt to decode the embedded message revealed partial strings of coordinates, equations, or random bursts of numbers that corresponded to seismic data. A few believed the transmissions were a form of encrypted telemetry related to Soviet missile tests. Others argued they were automated distress signals from lost German outposts. But the deeper analysts looked, the more the data eluded explanation. Each decoding attempt produced self-modifying ciphers that changed upon reanalysis, suggesting an algorithmic source that shouldn't have existed in 1945. In 1978, declassified British records show a meeting between NATO scientists at Brussels titled Anomalous Arctic Transmissions. The final report, marked top secret, concluded, source unknown, origin possibly geological or electromagnetic in nature. However, patterns display intentional encoding characteristics inconsistent with random noise. The last line, handwritten by an unidentified official, stated, "Recommend continued observation. Silence does not imply cessation." The transmissions continued sporadically until 1983, when they abruptly ceased. No further pulses were recorded until 1991, coinciding with the collapse of the Soviet Union. That year, a single burst was captured by Norwegian radar technicians stationed at Tromsø. The signal lasted 12 seconds. It contained no voice, no modulation, only a steady rhythmic pattern that matched the original 1951 recordings. Its final sequence, when translated through a binary filter, formed 3 letters, D12 today. The official position of NATO archives is that Division 12 was a meteorological support group absorbed by Soviet forces after the war. Yet no personnel rosters exist, no family records, no graves. The names of its supposed scientists are known only through unsigned requisition forms and a single inventory log listing magnetochemical. Instrumentation for polar field experiments. What? They were measuring remains unclear. Somewhere, beneath the Arctic permafrost, the ghost of Division 12 continues to whisper through time, a mechanical pulse that defies decay. For those few intelligence historians who have studied the case, one haunting question persists. If Division 12 truly perished in 1945, who or what kept transmitting for nearly half a century afterward? And why did the last message come not from the Soviet Arctic, but from beneath Greenland's ice shelf, on the same frequency once reserved for the dead of the Reich? Chapter 5. Project Riese. The depths beneath Owl Mountain. Buried under the Soe Mountains of Lower Silesia, Poland, lies one of the most enigmatic relics of the Third Reich, a vast complex of tunnels and chambers known collectively as Project Riese, or Giant. Built between 1943 and 1945 under the direction of the organization TOT, the project officially served as an underground headquarters for the Nazi High Command. But post-war investigations unearthed clues that pointed to something far stranger, a scientific and industrial labyrinth that defied both purpose and documentation. Soviet records called it the mountain that swallowed men. Allied intelligence called it the Black Warren. Within its silent stone corridors, a secret war project may have taken form and then vanished without trace. The first signs of Riese's true purpose appeared in 1946, when Polish mine surveyors found a sealed shaft near the village of Głuszyce. Inside, they discovered reinforced vaults lined with tungsten steel plating, power conduits thick as a man's arm, and ventilation ducts stretching into solid granite. The design far exceeded the scale of any known military bunker. A rusted sign, half buried in debris, bore the insignia of the ISS Wirtschaftsverwaltungshauptamt. The economic branch of the SS, the only legible text beneath it read, Abteilung Forschung Ahnenerbe, Sapandhas, Research Division of the Ancestral Heritage Office. Witnesses from nearby towns recalled slave labourers, mostly prisoners from Gross-Rosen concentration camp, marched daily into the mountains. Few returned. When Soviet investigators arrived in 1947, they recorded radiation spikes near the lowest tunnels and noted the presence of heavy metal drums sealed with lead. These were quietly removed to the USSR under armed escort. Their contents were never disclosed. A classified Soviet memorandum dated November 1947 refers to energetic apparatus of uncertain design, possible field induction source. Western analysts who later reviewed the document dubbed it Sturmkraftquelle, the source of assault energy. By 1950, much of Riese had collapsed or been sealed, yet occasional discoveries kept the myth alive. In 1958, a GRU officer named Colonel Viktor Malenkov reportedly smuggled blueprints from the Soviet sector into West Germany, intending to sell them to the Bundesnachrichtendienst. 3 days later, he was found dead in a Munich hotel, his briefcase missing. BND files, declassified in 1993, confirm the encounter and note the recovery of 2 technical sketches indicating magnetic field generation arrays powered by turbine rotation. Analysts compared the designs to early Allied experiments in electromagnetic propulsion. They were decades ahead of their time. The tunnels themselves stretch for kilometers beneath Owl Mountain. Even today, only a fraction have been mapped. Photographs from 1963, taken by Polish geologists, show concrete conduits etched with serial numbers and peculiar runic markings. Some chambers were large enough to house aircraft. Others, small, circular, and acoustically resonant, as if designed for machinery rather than men. Local legends tell of miners hearing deep vibrations in the stone long after the war, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from beneath the sealed floors. In one case, an engineer's compass spun wildly whenever he stood near a particular junction marked Einstieg D4. The anomaly was quietly noted and never investigated again. Declassified. British archives reveal that Project Riese was a subject of intense Allied interest under Operation Paperclip. In 1946, US military scientists interrogated several captured German engineers who had worked at the Wustergiersdorf site, one of Riese's 7 known entrances. Among them was Dr. Friedrich Trommler, an expert in high-voltage physics. According to his interrogation transcript, Trommler described an initiative under SS General Hans Kammler to develop a weaponized energy displacement device designed to neutralize Allied radar and communications. He referred to it only as Die Glock, the bell. The project was transferred, he said, to an underground site where the walls hum with power. When asked to specify the location, Trommler fell silent. His final statement before being transferred to US custody read, "Riese was not a shelter, it was a chrysalis." Over the next 2 decades, attempts to explore the complex were repeatedly obstructed. Polish military authorities declared the tunnels unsafe due to unexploded ordnance. In reality, several exploration teams reported electromagnetic interference that disabled their equipment. A Polish army engineer, Captain Marek Kowalewski, described hearing a mechanical pounding like turbines underground, though no power source existed in the region. His official report was confiscated. He died in a car accident weeks later. Theories about Riese's purpose multiplied. Some historians claimed it was a command center for Hitler's last stand. Others insisted it concealed a production line for advanced aircraft or nuclear weapons. But scattered evidence pointed toward a hybrid purpose, part weapons research, part archival vault. In 1964, a Czech intelligence memo surfaced mentioning transport of crate number 17 to Owl Mountain, contents unknown. secured by SS Brigadeführer Kammler personally. Kammler, responsible for both the V-2 rocket program and secret weapons projects, disappeared in May 1945. His death was never confirmed. During the 1990s, amateur explorers, using ground-penetrating radar, detected hollow cavities beneath Riese's lowest levels. Readings indicated chambers extending nearly 300 meters below the known tunnels. Attempts to drill were blocked by government authorities citing environmental protection. In 2011, a joint Polish-Czech geological survey conducted acoustic mapping of the area. Their sensors recorded rhythmic low-frequency vibrations deep within the bedrock, repeating every 36 hours. The phenomenon remains unexplained. Subsequent measurements registered identical frequencies at nearby abandoned rail tunnels, as if the same source resonated beneath them all. Adding to the intrigue, a classified US Air Force document from 1952, recently unearthed by Polish historians, referenced extracted energy field apparatuses recovered from Silesia, probable Axis origin. The same document noted that 2 crates marked with SS runes had been transferred to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for analysis. Their serials matched inventory codes found at Riese. When a Freedom of Information request sought clarification in 2010, the US Department of Defense responded with a single line: records non-existent or destroyed. To this day, access to several Riese sites remains restricted under the guise of conservation, yet locals still speak of sealed shafts from which strange metallic odors rise after heavy rain. Some report hearing low mechanical tones at night, sounds no one has been able to record, as cameras and microphones fail within certain zones of the tunnels. Engineers who have attempted to reopen the lower chambers describe inexplicable magnetic interference, their instruments spinning, lights flickering. As one investigator remarked, it is as though the mountain itself rejects intrusion. In 2019, drone footage revealed an unlisted entrance hidden beneath vegetation on the mountain's northern slope. The tunnel led to a vertical shaft descending into darkness, blocked after 40 meters by reinforced concrete. Across the slab, faintly visible, were stenciled words in German. Sturmkraftquelle aktiviert. Zutritt verboten. Translation: Assault energy source active. Entry forbidden. No official excavation has been authorized since. Government agencies dismiss the inscription as post-war graffiti, yet geophysical data collected in the vicinity continue to show intermittent thermal anomalies, brief surges of heat beneath solid rock, then silence. Whether these are geological coincidences or echoes of a forgotten machine, no one can say. Project Riese remains an open wound in history, a secret swallowed by the mountain. The archives are fragmented, the witnesses long dead, and the ground itself seems complicit in keeping its secrets. Whatever began there under the command of Kammler and the SS Technical Division may have died with the Reich, or perhaps, as some whisper, it still stirs beneath the stone, waiting for someone to listen. The files that survived tell only fragments, half-truths buried under decades of redaction and denial. Operation Lodestar, the Volkhov Directive, the Vatican signals, Division 12, Project Riese, each thread points towards something larger, a design that spanned continents and ideologies, surviving the war that was supposed to end all wars. Were these isolated anomalies or nodes of a deeper network, a shadow infrastructure built from stolen science and quiet bargains? The answers remain sealed behind cold metal doors and missing archives. But somewhere, perhaps beneath the ice, beneath the stone, the record still waits, humming softly, refusing to be erased.